Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to some of you to the Practical EdTech Creativity Conference. I'm your host, Richard Byrne. Thank you so much for joining back in or for joining us for your first session here. In this session, we have Jeremy Rinkel, who will be talking about 3D printing and 3D printing real-world solutions, some of the projects that he's been working on with his students. And this is a really exciting topic for me. I'm always keen to learn more about 3D printing and how students and schools are using 3D printing. So I'm really excited about it. Jeremy will be taking over in just a few moments, but I want to handle a couple of quick housekeeping things for those who weren't in the previous session. Number one, everything on your screen is being recorded. So if you have to step away because your kid spilled a bottle of milk in the background or your dog's barking at the mailman, whatever it is, everything is being recorded on the screen, so you can always go back and watch it. All the recordings will be available by the end of the week on my YouTube channel as well as at practicaledtech.com. If you have any questions during the webinar, please feel free to use the Q&A panel that's built into GoToWebinar. On most people's computer, the GoToWebinar client and the Q&A will be in the bottom right corner. Some of you may see it in the bottom left corner of your screen, however. But please take advantage of that. Now, your question may not get answered right away, but we'll try to get to all of those questions. If you're having a technical issue, I'll handle that on the back end for you. Just give me a shout out, say, hey, Richard, I need some help. Otherwise, Jeremy's here for sharing his presentation with you. And let me just cue him up to become the presenter right now, and he'll take it away from there. Give Jeremy control here. And he should be able to share with you right now. There he is, coming up right now.
Hello, everybody. Hey, hello, Richard. I figured out the speaker issue from last week, so we should be good to go on that. So I want to thank Richard for the opportunity to be here today to talk to you a little bit about 3D printing in the classroom and the solutions that are available with that. I think you may have lost my picture. I'll try sharing it again here. But what we're going to really talk about today is 3D printing solutions in the classroom. A little bit about me. I am an English teacher. I have been teaching high school English for about 4 or 5 years at my current position. And then before that, I taught social studies and history, or social studies and English. So a little bit of mixture of both, a little bit of passion for both the English as well as social studies. So why 3D printing? And how I really got involved with this, I kind of stumbled upon it. My students were talking to me about it, and I was talking to other teachers about some of the awesome stuff that they were doing in the classroom, and basically decided that I wanted to get a 3D printer, but funds weren't there, so I decided I'd write a grant. But why 3D printing? There are so many possibilities that we have with 3D printing in our classrooms, in our lives, at our homes, all kinds of different things. But I really think that in addition to the possibilities that are out there with 3D printing, I'm excited about the kids and what they can create and what they get out of the 3D printing experience. I believe it teaches design, critical thinking, and really a lot of problem solving skills that happen because I'll just be honest, all our prints don't turn out like they should. So for some reason the webcam isn't working, so you're not going to actually get to see some of the pieces that I have to show you, but there will be some pictures in the actual presentation you'll be able to see. So to continue with why 3D printing, it's got potential in a variety of different fields. You can look at geology, veterinary medicine, forensics, constructions. There are kits you can buy of 3D printed houses now. There are boats being constructed. The University of Maine has constructed a complete boat. So there are so many possibilities. Fashion. Had some students who couldn't really afford a class ring this year. So we're in the process of designing a class ring and then having them print that class ring, because there is so many possibilities of different colors of filament you can buy and stuff, so they can actually make a gold looking class ring. So fashion. And the one I'm most excited about is medicine. Just some of the advances that have been made in medicine. So for example, the human heart is one example of this, and they are using cells of the human heart as well as incorporating 3D printing within that to create a actual human heart. And here is an Israeli scientist holding a 3D printed heart. Obviously, it's a scaled model, but still, the possibility is there to majorly influence medicine and the way that we look at medicine in totally different ways. I've also seen some students, not my students, but some students from other schools actually create a prosthetic hand from 3D printing. So there's just so many different great possibilities of 3D printing. So going on with the whole medicine idea, I also wanted to look at the possibility of in veterinary medicine. The school district that my son and daughter go to, they are able to participate in a great industrial arts program there. And one of the projects that they did a couple years ago is a community member brought in a duck that had its foot amputated in an accident. I can't remember if it was an accident or if it was actually got bit off by another animal, or what actually happened with that. But they brought the duck in, they sized the duck up, they created multiple prototypes of this duck foot, and eventually were able to fit this duck with a brand new foot, so this duck could go back out into the actual its environment and recover with that. So those are just a couple of practical examples of how in medicine and vet medicine 3D printing could be used. So I'm going to kind of segue into our project. And our project, basically, I challenge students to look at the UN Sustainability Development Goals that the United Nations puts out. It used to be, it seems like they update these goals from probably about every 10 to 15 years, but I wanted them to really take on the goal, research it, study it, and then come up with a possible solution that we could print with a 3D printer. And we come up with a couple of the goals that really we couldn't come up with a particular printed solution, but for those, I ask that students actually create a symbol for that. So anyway, my one main thing that I wanted to show them was that I didn't want them to just come up with a solution to come up with a solution. I wanted it to be potentially viable. I wanted them to really think it out. I didn't want them to just say, okay, if we raise a bunch of money, we can solve the hunger problem. If we throw money at climate change, we'll be able to get rid of climate change. I didn't want the solutions to be like that. I wanted them to be viable, possible solutions that they could either 3D print or, again, create a prototype for. So it began with a research process of the UN goal that they were assigned. And what I found was students knew nothing about these UN goals or what they stood for, how they were measured. So we took about a week and a half to 2 weeks and just studied their UN goal, and we talked in class about possible viable solutions and that kind of thing. I provided a basic template that I wanted them to follow so that the projects would be consistent, but I wanted them to be able to look at a variety of other things as well that were interesting to them based upon that goal. Students were totally new to this idea of design thinking and the process of design thinking. So I went ahead and had them, we actually watched the movie Jobs, the movie on Steve Jobs, and we looked at his ways of actually narrowing and the way that he went through the process at Apple and used design thinking through his particular career and the people that he came in contact with throughout his time at Apple. So the students were required a variety of different things. They were required to research 3D printing and learn a new design software, Tinkercad, which none of them had been exposed to Tinkercad before, which we'll look at Tinkercad real quick. If I can get off my screen here for just a moment, I'll take you into Tinkercad just so you can see what it looks like. Basically, you start out with a work plane, and some kids designed an air filter or something, but you just basically just bring in a block or a shape, resize it, and do a variety of different things with that to actually create your design. It's a very easy to use, easy to learn type of software, but then again, it could be challenging as well for newer people into the actual 3D printing process. So learning Tinkercad was quite a challenge for some, but again, for others, it was relatively easy for them to pick up on. The other thing that with the 3D printing in Tinkercad, it's always sorry, I just lost my spot here. 3D printing in Tinkercad, there are many other types of CAD softwares out there. Tinkercad happens to be free, and it works on our Chromebooks here at school. So that's why I chose Tinkercad over all the other type of softwares. Their other requirement was to design a viable prototype. Again, prototypes don't have to work. They are a model. So it's important that that students understand that it doesn't have to work. Then we actually print the design on the 3D printer. And if this design fails, then we troubleshoot the design, we redesign, and we reprint. And that happens a lot. And that's the beauty of getting kids involved with 3D printing, teaching them the critical thinking skills, teaching them the problem solving skills, and then getting them to wrap their minds around a huge issue in the world and trying to come up with a viable solution. So as I began this process of 3D printing and going through discussions with certain people, with community members, with parents, with school board members, with my superintendent, they really questioned on how this tied to an English curriculum. And I battled with it because I feel that as a teacher, I need to be preparing my students for real life situations, real life world, and I need to be preparing them to obviously communicate, write well, research. So I thought this was a win-win, and I was able to convince them of that. But there was reading in this project, there was research, there was writing, there was citing of sources, and then ultimately communicating not only verbally, but creating a web page on their project, which I'll show you a little bit later. And in fact, the project basically, it does hit Common Core standards in English as well as quite a few ISTE standards. For the research portion, I provided a basic outline of what information I wanted the students to gather. the basic information from the United Nations sites, targets and indicators, which is the way that they measure the goals, possible solutions. I had them come up with at least 3 possible solutions, and then printing a prototype or printing one of those. We also, like I said earlier, we research design thinking, and it's basically a process for creative problem solving is what it is. So step 1 of that design thinking process is to empathize, sorry, is understanding the problem, understanding how people feel that are facing that problem, and kind of put yourself in another person's shoes to truly understand what the issue that needs to be solved is. The second step of that process is to define, and it's analyzing and interpreting and kind of creating a plan. So you're going from a need and as seeing an issue, or putting yourself in a person's place and feeling and needing to see change, to the planning state. Ideate is where the creative part takes place. It's where you begin to trial and error some possible solutions in your head, where you brainstorm with partners and try to figure out the best solution for that particular UN goal. Step 4 is the prototype. You create something that's real. I've seen students, before they've actually 3D printed, they've created a cardboard object of what they want their object to look like. So before they even sit down in Tinkercad, they have an idea on what shapes that they need to design that. It's actually where things really come to life at this prototype stage. Whenever it's 3D printed out, or whether the design is ready to go in Tinkercad, and whatever that brings the solution to life, whether it is just the Tinkercad design, the 3D model that they create with cardboard or a piece of paper, or it's actually the 3D design, that's the prototype. The testing phase, which again allows for the fine tuning, it allows for the student to problem solve why the print didn't turn out, or what may need to be adjusted. Like I go back to the duck example that my children's school did with the amputated duck foot, and the prototype didn't work the first time. They went back multiple times with different sizes or different ways to fasten it or whatever, and that's the test phase. And then sometimes what has to happen is you go back to the beginning and repeat the process and the steps. I want to get into a little bit of the nuts and bolts here of our printer, what we have, how we funded our project a little bit, and then we'll look at the student examples. So our school is about a 65 to 75% impoverished, free, reduced lunch school. So a lot of funds aren't available for extra things like 3D printers, like some technologies and that kind of thing. So I wrote a grant to a local company that has a plant in our town. It's called CF Industries. And we had to create, basically, as I wrote the grant, I wanted to do something that looked at water sustainability, because it has to be environmental or agricultural related. So I thought this tied in really well with the UN Goal project that we did. But our project, basically, we got the grant and were able to buy a printer as well as some filament for the printer, and able to get a good start this year. So our printer is a Monoprice Select Mini 3D printer, and I got it for I think $180 on Amazon, and it's for one color printing only. So it can only print one color at a time. While some of your larger models, more expensive models, can sometimes do 3 different colors of filament at one time. Ours can only do one, which is okay for what we're doing with prototyping and the design work that we're doing. It can use a variety of different filaments, ABS, PLA. It can use a wood type filament, a copper, a steel, or even a bronze film for that. It's definitely a great introduction printer. There are different, depending on what you're going to be doing with it, will depend upon the style of printer that you want to get. Obviously, the more expensive, you'll probably be doing a lot more detailed prints than what this one can do. But this is a good intro printer, again, to get the kids exposed to not only Tinkercad and design, but the whole critical thinking and problem solving process. We run HP G5 Chromebooks in my classroom, and we do utilize Tinkercad for our design work. One thing to note with Tinkercad, you're not able to actually slice the design in Tinkercad. Slicing is done in a program that on a regular desktop computer, it's called Kira. And Kira basically is a Windows-based or Mac computer-based program that slices the design into layers, basically, so that the 3D printer knows how to print it. So I put a definition of slicing up there because it is a 3D printable term. It's not something that people unfamiliar with 3D printing would know the meaning to. So slicing, basically, it takes that drawing. It's usually you can save in Tinkercad OBJ files and STL format files. And basically, I save them in STL because you can take STL files into Kira and then save them as G-code files for the printer that ours is. There are some others where you can just plug a wire directly right in from the computer to the printer and it prints. Ours, it's kind of a process. So we take the 3D drawing, save it as an STL image, pull it into Kira, and it generates a G-code file, which we use for printing. Again, the slicing process basically takes a 3D print and layers it. So you might have 2,000 layers in a print job, and it somehow the STL format into the G-code. It works. I don't know. I don't know any more technology than that, other than the fact that the STL in Kira is transformed to G-code. I'm sure there's a big, complicated technical description of that. So here's our actual process from taking our design to printed object. So we go into Tinkercad, we design it, save it as STL file, which is a stereolithographic file. We open the Kira software. Sometimes Tinkercad and Kira don't play well together. Sometimes you have to reformat the actual STL file to make sure it gets onto the Kira platform. When I mean platform, I'm meaning printer platform. You hit slice, it saves it as a G-code. It gives you a time frame of how long it's going to take to print. Sometimes print jobs are as quick as 40 minutes. The longest print job I've done is a 6-hour print, and I printed a breadboard it's like a circuit board to put components on, because we're starting to experiment with Arduinos and Raspberry Pis. So we're going to try to create some robots and different things like that. So we're going to 3D print as many components as we can for the actual robot, the movement of the robot, the circuit boards of the robots, and then actually do the wiring of the boards on our own. So lots of big, awesome projects coming, but we're going to 3D print most of that stuff. So I'm sorry you can't see me. I just tried to restart the webcam again, and it's just not going to work. So I apologize for not being able to see my awesome smiling face today. With any type of thing you do in the classroom, challenges are going to happen. And with me in particular, one of the things that I've learned these last few years is that if I'm not failing in the classroom, then I'm not taking enough risks. And I'll repeat that again. If you're not failing in the classroom, you're not taking enough risks. Because there's been times in my teaching career where I feel like I am stagnant and I'm comfortable. So, and that's not a good place for me to be personally as a teacher. So I try to do outside the box stuff. But with that comes challenges. With that comes chaos. And with this 3D printing thing, I had no idea how it was going to go. And we have challenging days and chaotic days, but then we have awesome days of celebration and victory too, when something actually happens right. So here are the challenges that we faced as we implemented this 3D printing program at my school, mainly my classroom. The science teacher has one as well, but most of the kids have been using mine in my classroom for right now. But the learning curve with the design, learning Tinkercad, learning the whole idea behind what design is and what is good design, what's bad design, was a learning curve. The software of Tinkercad, using Kira was a challenge. The overall process of how we transfer files from our Chromebooks to the desktop, and then from the desktop to the 3D printer was a process of learning. New goals with the United Nations goals, they had to learn the content of that. They had to learn the vocabulary surrounding 3D printing and their UN development goals, which again, it takes time. It's a process. It took us about 5 weeks to do what I'm going to show you in just a few minutes. Some students, they really don't care to get to that deeper level critical thinking. I shouldn't say that they don't care, but it's hard to get to that deeper level and critical thinking that our students need for the future, and we need to be modeling that with our students. So it's hard to get to that level. I heard so many students say, this is so hard. This is hard for me to think outside the box ways of solving issues. Why can't we just throw money at the problem and that be the solution? Why can't I just print a bunch of 3D printed coins? So once I got the mentality of creating something and saying, hey, this could be a possible viable solution if we can get this prototype to work. So trying to get students to that deeper level of thinking. As we continue to print, even today, I had a failed print today. It leads to a learning opportunity. One of the things that whenever we first started designing, we didn't understand the importance of putting what the printers call supports in. So basically the 3D printing filament can't just hold itself in the air. It's got to have some sort of some sort of support that you can break off, but it'll hold it in place for the time being. So we researched 3D printing supports and basically how to design those in Tinkercad so that they could easily be snapped off like a model, like if you buy the car model at Walmart or wherever, those little pieces that you snap off are supports to hold things in place as they print. So we had to research how to do that. But with each failed print, we've learned something new about supports and how to do that right. Oftentimes, we would trace our failed print back to the design process. How was it designed? Was it was part of the design off of the actual design plane? Because again, whenever it's off of the design plane, the 3D printer doesn't recognize that that it is off the plane, so it just basically spits filament into the air. So we learned quickly that that was a design flaw. And to see students do this without me getting involved is huge. Being able to brainstorm particular issues with the 3D printer, with the design process, seeing them help each other. That's why I do this type of activity and want to implement this activity, because if they can get together and brainstorm and collaborate and do these things, then they're going to be more creative, they're going to take more risks, and eventually, hopefully, solve some of these huge problems and issues that we have in our world. Maybe not through 3D printing, but maybe one of these students will be the next doctor that has to troubleshoot certain parts of a cell or whatever. But getting them to think that. Each one of the students, too, their groups that they would collaborate in, they would brainstorm through the issue. Some of them would go straight to the design process. So everybody approaches the problem solving a different way, and that's okay. And it's okay for students to be able to find their certain way in problem solving solutions. There's not one way to get to a math answer. There's not one way to get to writing an essay. There's not one way to solve a particular world issue. So some brainstorm, some just go straight to design, and that's totally awesome. So here were our major discoveries as we jumped into this project. That the issues our world faces are complex and multifaceted. Students were with the hunger issue. Well, why don't we grow more food? Why don't we have boats that have food to get to these places? And they learned a lot about logistics and all that stuff that comes into the hunger food problem. Why don't we just fix it? It was the thing, and they learned that there isn't an easy fix to these huge world problems. There are often, again, it's multifaceted, it's complex. You get different states and nations involved. It builds the complexity even. Another thing that we learned, the basics of 3D printing and prototyping are relatively easy to implement. If you sat down in Tinkercad and followed the process, I mean, you could have a print within an hour if you want to do it that quickly. We learned that the budget to begin a 3D program is relatively affordable. And I say relatively affordable because, again, this was an extra thing for my English program, so there was no money allotted for this. So I wasn't able to really spend $300 to $500 of my own money. So, but the 3D printer around $200, a Chromebook $150. You're using the free software. It is very possible to implement on a relatively low budget, or a donors choose project. There are different, depending on where you live, different people that will jump on to donors choose and fund particular projects, especially if it's involving technology, and it's in that range of $300 to $800. A lot of I've had 2 projects funded this year on donors choose, so possibility of that as a source of budgeting and making it even more affordable. While models and prototypes of the solutions could be viable, the logistics would be difficult for widespread implementation. One of my students designed an air filter. Well, this air filter is the size of a huge factory. So, yeah, the air filter could possibly work, but the logistics of that would be difficult. Also, with some of the designs that we found, a water filter, I'm not sure how I'm trying to think of the word, how hygiene and things like that would work with a PLA printed filter. I don't know what chemicals are really in PLA. I don't think it's like toxic or anything, but I don't know that I want to pour water through there to filter it. But again, in some countries, that might be super helpful to, get cholera out of the water and different things like that. So again, our prototypes could be viable, but the logistics of getting them into mainstream, getting them to where they need to be, and to see if they would actually 100% work, the logistics would be difficult to test. We also discovered, or we've come to the conclusion that as 3D printing continues to develop, get more affordable, get more viable, get larger, all those things, that the possibilities are endless. Like I started at the very beginning, I'm most excited about the medical advances that 3D printing can do. Prosthetic limbs, prosthetic hands, prosthetic fingers, artificial hearts. I mean, it's exciting times. It really is for the 3D printing industry, for education overall, to have these tools available to come into our classrooms, and for us to be able to model this to our students as a way or a possibility for career. So I'm going to go ahead and go to the current projects that we did. We looked at UN goals 2, 3, 4, 6, 8, 11, and 14. And I'm hoping that you're able to see my screen still. We looked at zero hunger, health and well-being. We looked at education, clean water and sanitation, sustainable communities, and life below water. So I'm going to open up this UN Goal 8. And you're going to see, again, I tried to make these as consistent, or require some consistency among these projects. Mainly the goal of decent work and economic growth was to promote sustainable economic growth. This is going to be hard to actually create a 3D prototype for. So I encouraged my student to create a symbol. So she created a screwdriver as a prototype. If I had my webcam working, I could show you this, her actual 3D printed screwdriver. I'm going to try to take a picture here real quick. It says it could that I could take a picture whenever I was on another view. Let me see where that was at. Well, I can't find it back now. But anyway, I can post these on my website or on their websites a little bit later. We haven't got to that point yet in actually posting the actual 3D printed, because we've been in the process of that. So if you look at this particular design here, at the bottom, I'm going to go ahead and try to draw here. Right here, those 4 little pegs there, whenever I was talking about supports earlier, those are supports, because when the 3D printer prints, it starts down here at this layer down here, and it prints back and forth until it grows up. So when it gets to this point here, if those supports aren't there, the PLA just falls, or the printer filament. So it's important to build those supports into that design. So that was a symbol that a student came up with. The next solution I'll go back to here is, and I didn't erase my screen, so you're going to see all my marks there. We're going to go to quality education. Erase all, there we go, erase all drawings. So in quality education, we looked at the rural areas in particular, not only in our country, but in other countries as well. And her possible solutions was a one-room schoolhouse type of mentality, but she also created a mobile school bus, which I thought that was kind of cool. I've read of mobile boats where kids would get on boats to go to school, or they would have a boat in their community that's where their school was. So talks about her viable solution here with the possibility of creating a mobile bus. This student tackled the idea of zero hunger and came up with multiple solutions. All this research here on the screen, here and down here, that was all taken from the UN website, and I highly encourage the students to use that website again to compile the information to make sure everything was consistent. So her solutions were to create a possible boat that would bring food to countries that didn't have food, and also to create a field box where if they didn't have the good soil to grow the crops, this would be an oxygen and nitrogen filled soil box that they could plant crops anywhere and everywhere, was her viable solution. Again, logistically, would it work? Really don't know. But the idea that she's thinking about the process and students brainstormed around her idea, again, that's what makes this whole project awesome, and again, getting them to think outside the box. I'll show you one more because I need to be wrapping up here. This one was good health and well-being. Again, the idea of hers were possible solutions to the malaria problem. She suggests cleaner clothing, more affordable and accessible syringes that could be sent and made. And I know that the Gates Foundation does a lot of great work around malaria and other huge diseases and different things that affect them. So let me go back to my slideshow here to kind of wrap things up. Again, I'm Jeremy Rinkel. I teach in Illinois, rural high school, teach high school English. There are some websites that you can see some of my work, jeremyrinkel.com, tiktokteacher.com. If you're not on TikTok, you can find me there. I do a lot of TikToks now. Some of it is content-based, some of it's just fun stuff. And then Teach Like Woodstock is my student engagement, how I use student engagement and different other strategies to get students involved and excited about being in the classroom. So with that said, that will wrap up my part of the conference, and I appreciate you listening and being part of it. Are there any questions for me, Richard?
Yeah, Jeremy. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. There were a few questions. Number one, actually, these are not in the order they came in, but anyway, number one, in reverse order. Question about how do you keep kids interested while the projects are printing? Like you mentioned that it takes 6 hours, I believe. The question was, how long does it take to how do you keep the kids interested, basically?
Okay. Well, typically, whenever a student sees a successful print, it rejuvenates everybody's attitude towards the project. Because some kids are still waiting for their project to even be printed the first time, and because right now I don't trust the printer enough to let it print while I'm not here. I want to make sure I keep an eye on it, make sure I don't burn the school down because I need my job, right? But anyway, to answer the question, while the print jobs are going, we go back and we'll do more English study. We'll research. We read novels in that downtime that we're not actually doing the design process. So I don't know if I really answered that the way that the person wanted it answered or what they were expecting. But basically, to keep them interested in the whole project along the time, like I said, anytime somebody prints something that actually turns out or it's awesome, and sometimes I throw in a fun one, like a kid found a design for T-Rex, so I printed a T-Rex, and that just rejuvenates the whole excitement for 3D printing. So yeah.
Cool. And there's two other questions here. So one was, can you color on the filaments? So like
You know,
you meant that came in while you're talking about how you can print only one color at a time with your printer.
okay.
So can
Yeah,
you,
how about
actually
I
color on
test it
them
real
with
quick? I've
marker
never
or paint
tested
on
it.
them?
I'm sure you can paint on it. Let me see if I can marker on it. It's going to be kind of hard to tell because I'm using a black filament right now. So I think marker would work as well. You may have to spray it with like a clear coat of I don't know what it's called, not polyurethane, but something like that to hold the color on there. Because with the marker, and I just tested it right now, and maybe it wasn't dry yet, but it rubbed off pretty easy. So if you were to use marker, you might want to cover it with some sort of a clear coat of something. But yeah, it could definitely be paintable.
Cool. All right. And so the other question that came in was, any tips for writing grants?
Oh boy. Yes, I can. I'll give you the short, really quick version here. Go to donorschoose.org and find something that you're wanting to do. Maybe it's 3D printing. Maybe it is getting Raspberry Pi computers. Maybe it's getting iPads for your classroom. Whatever you're looking for, go in there and just search 3D. If it's 3D printing, search 3D printing grants, and just look at the verbiage. Look at the ones that have been funded, and then I'm not saying copy it. I'm saying look at the verbiage to you know what I'm saying. You don't copy and paste somebody's their work, but look at the verbiage and what they did and model it off of that. That's how I've been successful with Donors Choose. With the other grants, sometimes it's just taking a stab in the dark, and I try to gauge my grant writing based upon whether I think I'm going to get it, because it takes a lot of time. So with Donors Choose grants, go in there and just look at what you might be looking for doing in your room, and then go from there. But again, look at the verbiage, study it, see what's funded, and then go after it. Donors Choose also they'll offer matches at certain times. So if say somebody donates $20, they'll match that $20 donation. The Gates Foundation just did that a couple months ago. That's how one of my projects finally went over the limit, was whenever Gates Foundation matched it. So so that's what I would suggest if you're just totally new to grant writing, is to look at what's out there, what's been done, what's been funded. And if you have any more specific questions on that, just reach out to me. I think my email address, I don't know if it was on that slide or not, but it is jeremyrinkel@gmail.com. Feel free to reach out to me and just say, hey, I heard you talking on this, and I'd be more than happy to help you get started with that.
Cool. And we can follow you on TikTok now too.
Absolutely, it's fun. It's a fun little journey. It's been taken. I've got one that went viral, like 207,000 views or something.
Wow.
I have no idea the algorithm, but I've never had a blog post get 207,000 views. So
That's awesome. That's awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much, Jeremy. I hope everyone has picked up some new things that they can use, or some new inspiration to get started using 3D printers. And we find out that it's not nearly as expensive as we might have thought, or as it used to be. And so coming up at 5 o'clock, in about 10 minutes from now, we have Karen, who's going to be talking about coding and drones. The title of her presentation is Coding plus drones equals 100% engagement. And she'll be talking about the 4 C's of critical thinking, creativity, collaboration, and communication using drones and some free apps that go along with them. So that'll be coming up in just about 10 minutes. If you have any questions for Jeremy, feel free to reach out to him. And if you have any questions about any of the webinars, you need to get in touch with any of us, just shoot me an email, richard@burn.media, and I'll put you in touch with all the right people. So thanks so much, everyone, and I'll see some of you again in about 10 minutes. And thanks again to Jeremy. Check out TikTok Teacher and check out his 3D printing resources as well. So thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.